I'm Paul Richards. This museum is a charitable trust. In other words, it's not run by the council, it's run by volunteers, and there are 12 trustees, 30 volunteers, only 3 part-time members of staff, and I'm the chairman of what we call the North End Trust, because the museum is set in this old area, which doesn't look very old, some of it now, but it was the fishing quarter of King's Lynn for 1,000 years.
Wow, 1,000 years.
Yes.
So is that how old these buildings are behind us?
No, they've all gone. The buildings behind you are the 2 cottages left. We're standing in the yard. Yeah. There's another 4 cottages there, so there were 6 cottages, and by a stroke of luck they were saved, or accidentally saved. This is how most fisherfolk live. So all over this area there are probably 100 or more similar yards. Wow. So this is the only yard left, and that's why the museum is not just a museum, it's also a heritage site. You know, in other words, this is where it happened, and it's a unique survival, and that's why the museum was founded.
So we're really lucky to actually have these buildings remaining today.
And thanks to Mrs. Pat Midgley, who she passed away in January, but she saw the cottages on she came to live in the area from the balcony up there. She saw the 2 cottages and she said, I was told they'd all been demolished, but there's 2 more, because a local grocer was using them for storage. Oh. And so they just escaped demolition. Mainly in the 1930s, when most of the yards were demolished, people went to council houses. So in the early 20th century, the cottages are 200 years old plus, just over 200 years, and so 50 odd people lived in the yard at one time, say 120 years ago. There'd be 50, 60 people living here, 6 cottages, 1 up, 1 down, 1 tap, 1 toilet, extremely crowded. You can imagine the smells and activity in the summer and the cold in the winter. The fishing boats went out and came back, and the ladies ran the yards. They sorted out all the fish and the shrimp, sometimes even in the cottages on the floor, because the floors are brick floors. So they had to sort out the catch. They did the washing. They knitted these very strong jumpers for the fishermen, but while they were waiting for the fishing smacks to come home, because just across the street was the fisher fleet where all the fishing smacks came. There were over 400 fishermen. So there were shops and pubs. This was a little area of Lynn, quite detached from the main town, and the people here who lived here were called Northenders.
Yeah, we've heard of EastEnders, but this is the Northenders.
This is definitely the Northenders of King's Lynn, and their great chapel of St Nicholas. You can see the spire just over the house there. That was their chapel by the 20th century, and so the chapel survives, this survives. There are a few houses in Pilot Street, which was sort of the high street of the North End, but most of the community has now built up, has gone, but people born here still come back to the museum and meet here. We call them the VIP club. Oh, wow. Very important people. And so all the stuff you see in the museum cottages, in the museum itself, in the main body of the building, everything you see has been given to us by people who came or were born from the North End. So the culture and the pride of being one of the fisherfolk of Lynn still survives, and we rely on their support because our biggest income is donations. So donations, income through the door, that's £3 for adults, and we have all the time fundraising. We have things in this yard. We're going to have something in August if the weather improves. Yeah. We're going to have a barbecue here in the summer. So remember that we're a community museum. Education, tourism, community meetings, and we have to raise money all the time to survive. The Borough Council does give us a small grant, which we're very thankful for.
Brilliant stuff. It's really nice to hear that they're still keeping the community spirit going, because that's what the Northenders are all about, isn't it?
That's right. Without community and working together, the thing could have easily been lost. You know, you can imagine disasters, difficulties, you know, the fisherman dies, families. What's going to happen to people if they don't stick together? So individualism was not on the agenda. You had to stick together, and they sang songs in the pubs and at sea, you know, because songs, don't they, sort of sea songs, keep people in unison. You do things together through song, and it was through song that all the stories of hundreds of years ago came, not history books, but through oral history, and through song the history of this area was conveyed or carried through song, going right back to Napoleon and beyond. So they kept together in the pubs, in the cottages, in the yards, and they were like a King's Lynn tribe.
Wow, isn't that amazing? It'd be nice if life was more like that today, wouldn't it?
Yes, if it was more community spirited and less selfish.
Yes.
Northenders were never if they were over selfish, they became very unpopular very quickly. Although there were divisions, most Northenders didn't own fishing smacks like this activity. Only minority owned fishing smacks, and the richer ones did move out just to a new area not far from here called the New North End. That's Luke Road. It's not very far away.
Oh, right.
But so there were divisions between. There were a few richer people, so I'm not saying it was all harmonious, but certainly for most of the history, the community stuck together. For example, poor people couldn't survive. They were never sent to the workhouse. The community kept them. They went to relatives or they were looked after. The idea of sort of losing your pride and dignity by going into the workhouse was avoided at all costs. And Vaughan Williams, the great composer, came in 1905 and he picked up 30 folk songs from this area, sea songs, which inform his music, like Norfolk Rhapsody 1, 2 and 3, the Sea Symphony.
Wow.
He's even got a hymn. He wrote one of his hymns he wrote is called King's Lynn. And so the link with Vaughan Williams, who died in 1958, folk song is a very strong one, and of course he was a world famous composer, certainly in English, a famous English composer, the great Vaughan Williams. So there's all these linkages, and the cottages and the smokehouse to my right, where they smoked herring, have now been listed by English Heritage, so they are now regarded as buildings of national importance.
Wow. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Northenders. I could stand here all day. There's so much to learn, isn't there?
There's a great deal to learn, and we have school. Important point is we want the younger generation to come and see and enjoy themselves, but also learn the values, the strong values of the past.
Definitely.
So we have lots of schools coming, and they play here. They do Victorian wash days. They pretend to take the Sanford cart around the town singing that. They go into the museum. They dress up as pirates, because sometimes the fisher folk, especially in the 17th and 18th century, there were lots of pirates in the Wash.
Oh.
It was infested with pirates. So the kids come. We have 30 schools attached to the museum. So children, we have a timeline in the main body of the museum. We have the history of the North End, the history of King's Lynn, and the history of England, and their job is to see the connections, and so we are very much for the schools, but we're also for older people, people in the middle. We're for everyone, because we're for the community.
Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Okay, pleasure.
It's been amazing.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.